Okay, think hard. Who is the first person who was born? Who was the first person who was born? Cain. Yes, Genesis chapter 4. First person who was born was Cain. Didn't take long. What did Cain do? Killed his brother. And the specific point that we're going to make from that account this morning is when you get into Genesis chapter 4 and verse 8, Cain talked with Abel his brother. It came to pass that when they were in the field, that Cain rose up against Abel his brother, and he killed him. So why did he kill him? Okay, jealousy. And Hebrews chapter 11 kind of gives us a little bit, maybe more to go on. Chapter 11, verse 4, by faith Abel did what? Offered more perfect sacrifice. What we take from that can be, the Bible just never specifically says why he was killed. We do know it was jealousy. We don't know exactly what was going on within that. But the point was, in the 9th verse, the Lord said to Cain, "Where is Abel your brother?" And what does Cain respond? Am I my brother's keeper? What was Cain trying to do? What was Cain trying to do? Maybe trying to cover up? What else could you say? This is a really big thing today. Not the murder part, but it's a big for people to try to do this today. What was Cain trying to do? He was trying to absolve himself of any kind of responsibility by asking the question, am I my brother's keeper? So part of the life of a disciple, what it means to be a disciple, and through all of these lessons, this is lesson number 8, we've got 13 lessons in total. Through all of these lessons, we are quick to tell people that we are a Christian, because it is accurate. We show up and we worship God and we do the things that we're supposed to do, again, because it's what we're supposed to do, and we consider ourselves a Christian. This has allowed us to look deeper into it, to ask the question, am I a disciple? And a big part of being a disciple is, guess what? From this lesson, is what? Is being our brother's keeper. Because when you think about it, God could have set up, I don't like using this word, God could have set up Christianity any way He could have wanted, any way He could have desired to do it. He could have made everyone to be a Christian with just mental assent. We talked a little bit about that in the lesson. He could have made it to be something that's extremely individual, but that's not the way He did it. He made it to have very specific markers. I am repenting of a wicked life. I am confessing Christ before men. I am being baptized into Christ. All of these are very specific markers. I rise and walk in newness of life, and that newness of life looks very different than my previous life. But as far as what we do with each other, God designed the relationship with Him to include what? A humongous relationship with others. And that relationship with others, of course, has lots of responsibilities. And that's what this lesson covers. Now, as we get into each one of these responsibilities, and there's several of them, I want you to consider, and I want you to remember that the lesson was intended for the people who are sitting in the pew. So any relationship, whether we talk about our relationships with one another spiritually, a marital relationship, a parent-child relationship, your relationships at work, for example, all of those depend on how many parties? 2 parties. Now, this lesson is only written for the point of one of those parties, okay? And hopefully by us learning that one part of the party, then it'll all work together. There are going to be cases, which I'll stop and make note of, where we are, I hope, doing what we should do. We've got the right attitude, or pretty close to the right attitude, and having the right attitude, I know, is difficult at times with specific people, with specific situations, with your own background. But we're trying, maybe imperfectly, to do the right thing. We're trying, maybe imperfectly, to have the right attitude, but that's only one part of the equation. I can't do a responsibility if that responsibility depends on two people, because I'm trying, and what's coming back to me? Nothing. Okay? So we'll bring that up. We'll make some points along those lines as we go through the lesson itself. But the first responsibility that we bear to everyone is love. And there's a very interesting way in which this is put in Romans chapter 13, verses 8 through 10. Because usually when you look at, for example, Matthew chapter 22, what instruction is given to us in Matthew chapter 22? That we love the Lord, and then we love what? We love our neighbor as ourselves. Romans chapter 13, verses 8 through 10 isn't going to change that, but it does add something to it. So it throws another dimension into it. If you're a lady and you like diamonds, it adds another facet to it. It's not a slight. My wife likes diamonds, so I know the feeling. It adds another facet to it. Romans chapter 13, verse 8. Owe no one what? Anything. So it adds the facet of love being what? An obligation. And in fact, so should I owe money? Should I owe money? This is kind of a trick question. Should I owe money? I guess this comes down to a philosophical question. If I bought a car, which I did, and I have payments to make, which I make, do I owe money? If I'm fulfilling the obligation, do I owe money? Yeah. Do I owe money? Not really, because I'm what? Because I'm paying it, I'm fulfilling the obligation. If I'm 3 months late, it's a whole different situation. If I'm fulfilling my obligation, I owe no man anything. What is the only obligation that I can't get out of? And that is to what? To love one another. Who famously gets people out of debt? Well, he can't get them out of debt. He can only what? Who famously gets people out of debt? You know what I mean. Who famously gets people out of debt? Anyone who gets people out of debt? Dave Ramsey gets people out of debt. Actually, what does he do, Janice? You're right. He sets them down and gives them a plan. If you go the whole 9 yards, he'll help you budget out, and you follow this plan. He gets people out of debt. Do I ever get out of debt to love people? No. But what is something very crucial to understand about love? And I posted about this on Facebook several days ago, maybe a few weeks ago. Love sometimes doesn't look like love, okay? If I saw you, if you guys had little kids or if you had grandkids, and you are jumping all over their case in Walmart because they are throwing a fit, in that instant, Do you love your child or your grandchild? Yeah, you love them, but it doesn't what? Doesn't look like it. Doesn't look like it. You love them, just doesn't look like it. So we can proclaim our love for one another, but in certain circumstances, it what? It's not going to look the way that you think it's going to look. And we need to remember that, because that's very, very important. You know, there have been people who've had to talk to me about things that I've done wrong. Love didn't look like love at that particular point. And so I never, ever lose the obligation that I have to love all of you. You don't lose the obligation to love me. Part of what makes us brothers keepers, and really the reason why this lesson begins with this point, is that the most important one has got to be what? Has got to be love. Because if that fundamental point doesn't exist, then nothing else is going to be worth it. Like number 2, consideration. So let's go to Hebrews chapter 10 and verse 24. Hebrews chapter 10, verse 24. And what does Hebrews chapter 10, verse 24 say? Okay, so what does anyone have a different word than consider? Okay, to stir up. The word consider means to observe someone fully, to fix their eyes on someone. To observe them fully. Difficult to do in our day and time. Why is that? Difficult to do in our day and time. Why is that? We got so many things to do. We've got so many things to do. Your life probably boils down to very few but incredibly significant things. So your life would boil down, and I mean day-to-day life. Let's just excise the spirituality part of it just for a second. So what does your life kind of boil down to? Going to your job. Okay, what else? Taking care of your family. Usually those 2 things. If I could add a third one, it would be managing the distractions. So those 3 keep most people what? Pretty busy. Pretty busy. The idea of considering means to observe fully and to fix their eyes on someone. It means that we need to, as best we can, we need to watch people. We need to try to watch people. All of us do imperfect jobs. Probably the easiest thing to be able to see is when someone misses because they're sick. And sometimes, I get so buried with what has to be done on a day-to-day basis, which is remarkable. You would think you only have 2 days a week, Sunday and Wednesday, that you do so. But something has to be done every single day. 7 days a week, there's got to be work that's done every single one of those days. People will get sick and it'll be weeks before I ask about them, because it gets away from me. I don't mean it to. It just does. Let alone the things that bother them emotionally, because that's what? That's much what? It's harder to consider, because it's harder to see, because most of us, 99% of us, when it comes to really deep emotional problems, there is an incredibly strong tendency. When I say incredibly strong tendency, 99% of us, we're going to do what with the emotional problems, the emotional pain that we go through? We're going to what? We're going to try to hide it. We're going to try to hide. This is part of the point where I said that it takes 2. So for us to consider one another and act toward one another, we've got to have what? You've got to have information. Okay, if I get too busy, then the information does me no good. If I have time but I have no information, I can't what? I can't help. So, you know, you might think, well, as we go down through this list, well, I hadn't seen him do that, I hadn't seen him. You have to remember, it takes two people to be able to accomplish these things. But we look on other people. That's why you've got Philippians chapter 2, verse 4. And Philippians chapter 2, verse 4 is a really, really good, you kind of get yourself dated. Although people still do this. Put actual verses someplace in the house, whether they put it on the refrigerator or they put it on the mirror or something like that. Now everyone just does what? It just pops up on your phone. Philippians chapter 2, verse 4. However you choose your delivery system, Philippians chapter 2, verse 4 is a good one. What does Philippians 2, verse 4 say? It doesn't mean that I have to ignore what's going on in my life. I just need to make sure that I'm what? That I'm looking out for others. So, you've got the idea of considering, or the idea of looking out, which honestly is pretty passive. But then there's another part to it, and we've already read it in Hebrews chapter 10 and verse 24, and that is provocation. Provoking. Now, what does provoking mean? We talked about considering. What does provoking mean? It means to take action. So if you stimulate something, then you're provoking someone, you are inciting someone to action. You talk about moving and moving really fast. Shocked yourself. Anyone ever replaced a light bulb when the lamp is shorted out? Anyone ever replaced a light bulb when the lamp is shorted out? Or when the light bulb has a short in it? Ron, what does it do to you when you're trying to unscrew it? It bites. And that's an interesting way to put it, because that's kind of sort of exactly what it feels like. And the bad part is, and I'm assuming this is correct, the higher the current is, it's fairly easy to let go when it's 110 volts. But it's not instantaneous. So while you're standing there and it's getting you, it takes just a second or two to let go. Now, Ron, am I correct in that the higher the voltage, or particularly maybe the amperage, the harder it is to actually let go? So, an electric fence. So how many volts is an electric fence? How many volts is an electric fence? Dan's not in here. How many volts is an electric fence? RV, how many volts is an electric fence? Yeah, and I'm glad you used the word hurt, because that's what it does. It hurts. I can't remember how I ended up hitting one time, but it rattles your teeth. It hurts. So you are incited, or you are stimulated in that moment, because you've got electricity going through you. So the idea here is that we are provoking one another. So provoking normally has a negative connotation. Meaning what? If you're provoking someone, you're doing what to them? You're pushing them, and you're eventually someone gets provoked enough, they're going to get angry, they're going to get mad. The idea behind this provocation, and again with the electricity, whether it's a light bulb or it's an electric fence, you're experiencing pain. This provocation is exactly the opposite. This provocation is positive, and it's happy. This is literally people cheering each other on. Why is that harder to do? Why is that harder to do? So you would have someone, and there would be the tendency, something good had happened in their life, but you've got the tendency to want to what? Something good happens in someone's life, but you've got the tendency to want to what? Kind of rain on the parade. I'll tell you a perfect example. Someone has a new baby. You're happy for them, but you just can't resist telling them what? Oh, you're going to hate being up all night. You see what I mean? So it's like, you just can't resist to get a little negative dig in. We all do it. We've all done it. Don't sit there and look at me with a blank stare like you've never done it. We all do it. And that is something that all of us have to fight. Hopefully we do a pretty good job, but again, I'll be the first one to admit that I know that I don't do as good as I should on a lot of things. But this provocation is something that is very positive. It does cheer people on. It congratulates people. I love the word, and maybe we went through the Beatitudes forever ago, and maybe I'll do that again, but I didn't want to do it in the lessons because when I get the ladies' class back, that's what I want to do. So I've kind of put that on the back burner. But as a little foretaste, do you know what the word blessed means? We think it means to be happy, and that is true. But more precisely, do you know what the word blessed means? To be congratulated. To be congratulated. When someone graduates high school or when they graduate college, what do we do to them? We what? We congratulate them. We are what for them? Happy for them. We pronounce a blessing, as it were, upon them. That's what being blessed means, to be congratulated. So when we provoke one another, what we're trying to do is we have a sincere, positive interest in people doing better, in striving for something, in conquering their things that they've struggled with maybe for a long, long time, and they've overcome them. We congratulate them. We bless them because we have, hopefully, a very, very good, deep interest in them. Let's talk about exhortation, because again, exhortation is a positive step. So, provocation, and remember, all these are different. Consideration is more of a passive one. Provocation is more positive, so you're cheering someone on. What about exhortation? What about exhortation? All of these have slightly different meanings, but practically they end up being sometimes pretty different. So what does exhortation mean? So if you're encouraging someone, do you know the background of the word encourage in the New Testament? It's very neat, very rich term. It's similar to parable. So let me ask, does anyone know what the word parable means? Or encouragement, either one, because they're both kind of sort of similar. So a parable is where you have something, a physical, a spiritual truth, and you're bringing something alongside it. What you're bringing alongside in a parable usually is what? Some kind of physical reality. A sower went out to what? Sow. And it teaches this spiritual truth by bringing a physical truth alongside it. So to encourage someone or to exhort someone means that you have called someone to your side. You've called someone to your side. And there is the idea that when you're called to the side, that you are going to cheer them on. But there is maybe a slightly deeper meaning. When someone is called to your side, the natural response to people when you are called to their side is that you're going to hug them, or that you're going to make sure in some physical way they know that you're there. You're going to put your arm around them. So the point of exhortation versus provocation is that it is something active, but it's just a little bit more intense. When we exhort one another, what do we do? When we exhort one another, what do we do? In order to build a house, I haven't built very many houses. I think I've only done 2. Although my grandfather was a form maker, a concrete form maker, back in the good old days where you had to make everything out of plywood and 2x4s. So, in order to make a form stand, what did you have to do? You got to brace it. You have to prop it. Okay? So when you prop something up or when you brace something, that's basically, guess what word? That's basically what you've got with exhortation. So we are calling each other to our side to do what? Brace each other, prop each other up. Now again, in order to perform this function, I have to have, and you have to have, information. Information. And James mentioned love, and certainly he's true with that. He's true with that. But we got to have information, in order to do this. Let's go to 1 Thessalonians chapter 5, verse 14. Some things that people need are readily apparent to us, but not everything. 1 Thessalonians chapter 5 and verse 14. So what does 1 Thessalonians chapter 5, verse 14 say? So, people who are unruly, can you see that? If someone is unruly, can you see that? Most of the time. Or what if they're unruly in their heart? Can you see that? Sometimes yes, sometimes no. I make the argument that usually if someone is unruly in their heart, it doesn't take long until what happens? Until you see it. And that usually does take place. I don't know that you could say that 100% of the time, but there is a very high correlation. But think about this. Comfort the faint-hearted. Are you going to see that? Comfort the faint-hearted. Are you going to see that? Not every time. Not every time. Why would someone be faint-hearted? How could someone be faint-hearted? Give me a situation where someone could be faint-hearted. Was today the first time you did them? I didn't think it was. You did really well. Announcements are tricky, aren't they? Why would someone be faint-hearted? Or maybe the first time you waited on the table or said a prayer, any of that. First time you taught a class? Any of you guys remember the first time you taught a class? Why would someone be faint-hearted? Someone could be afraid. What could go on in their life that would make them faint-hearted? Right. Maybe they've learned that their job is what? Is going away. Maybe they just got a diagnosis that's really serious. Maybe their child is sick. Maybe their marriage is in trouble. And they are faint-hearted. Are you going to see that? And I think I could sum up what Jerry said with one word. Maybe you see it, maybe you don't. I've had people, and I mean it's not. I'm not being critical. It is human nature, and I can't just criticize broadly human nature because that does no good. But I've had people hide stuff from me for a long, long time. And I don't even mean that it's bad stuff. I just mean a cancer diagnosis or a child being sick or something like that, and they've hid it for a long, long time because it is within, and this is a part of the American experience that I have told you guys before I don't like. But everyone in America thinks that if they've got a problem, who's going to fix it? They are. Them and them alone. So we're not real conducive to sharing our problems with everyone, because the last thing in America you want to appear to be is weak or needy or dependent. So we have this tendency to not tell people when we have struggles. And I've had people hide stuff from me for years that I've never known about. Again, not evil, ungodly stuff, just hide stuff for years. And I'll admit, it is a bit difficult to provoke. It's a bit difficult to exhort when we don't have the information. But when we do, what does exhortation mean? It means that 1 Thessalonians 5 verse 14 is a great example. You warn the people who are unruly, because you can't do what? You can't do what? If you can do it, I'd have been doing it for a long, long time. You can't just reach down into someone's life and make them what? And make them better, and make them do what you want them to do. You just can't do that. So what's the only alternative that you have? Yes. But if they're unruly, you warn them. Usually when someone's unruly, you can't encourage them to be better. What have you got to do? You've got to warn them. Like the kids. I gave this illustration several weeks ago. Kids are out playing in traffic. You don't bring them in and set them down and say, now look, there's just something that I feel like we need to talk about. You're playing in traffic. How do you handle a child that's playing in traffic? It's immediate, and it's usually pretty what? It's pretty stern. It's pretty fierce, because it needs to be. Why? So they'll learn very, very rapidly the lesson. If someone is being unrighteous and unruly, it's hard to encourage them out of it. Sometimes, just like 1 Thessalonians chapter 5, verse 14, you've got to hit it hard. You warn the unruly. But that's not what you always do. But with other people who are faint-hearted, you comfort them. What about the people who are weak? I didn't even get to this. Can you physically see people who are weak? Someone said yes, someone said no. What a perfect answer. Can you see someone who is weak? Maybe. Again, maybe you'll see it, maybe you won't. Maybe the answer will reach 100% if you give it enough time. I'll even accept that answer. But what do you do with them? You uphold the weak. And then finally, in the verse, capping it all off, you're what? You're patient with all. Then in 15, we didn't read this. But see that no one renders evil for anyone, but always pursue what is both good for yourselves and for all. Basically, we do everything with, what's number one? We do everything with love. Okay, next up, restoration. Restoration. Okay, so what is restoration? Oh, to bring back? What else? Not really fishing season. What do you do with the, and we don't even really fish this way. Boy, this was a poor metaphor. Catching minnows. How do you guys catch minnows? I'm praying this is not a different way in Texas than you did it in Tennessee. Do you know how we caught minnows? 2 people with 2 sticks and a net in between them. Does any of this sound right? Okay, seine, yes, seine. I was going to use that word, but I thought, well, no one will know what that is. Okay, so you seine down a river and you catch all the minnows. Both of you lift it up. You've got minnows. You put it in the bucket, and then you go fishing. We always had to seine every time we wanted to go fishing. We had to go get live bait, and my dad was cheap and did not want to go and buy it, so we always had to go get the bait first. So, what ruins the whole experience of trying to get bait? A hole in the net. So restoring can mean essentially mending or repairing. Now, one of you guys said to bring someone back, which is, again, a perfect way to define it. But also running underneath that is the concept of repairing something, fixing something that was bad. So what does Galatians chapter 6, verse 1 say? What does Galatians chapter 6, verse 1 say?
If a man is overtaken in any trespass, you who are spiritually restore such a one in a spirit of gentleness, considering yourselves, lest you also be tempted.
So some people depart from the Lord. The easy thing, oh man, the easy thing. And I can't tell, from the perspective of a preacher and from the perspective of an elder, I cannot tell you how easy it is to just what? Just let them go. When they depart from the Lord, the easiest thing in the world is to just let them go. Because there are people who, in a wonderful way, want to be restored. That's a great experience. But unfortunately, most people don't want to be. And that's where it gets really, really, really difficult. Okay, we'll take back up with this one and talk a few more minutes and then just keep on going next week with on down through our list.